If you go down to the woods today, you're in for a big surprise. Just before we begin, myself and Stephen Kerr are running for election, and our GoFundMe link is in the comments if you wish to support us. Thank you. The management of a leixlip asylum seeker centre have strenuously denied that a not insignificant amount of human waste found in a nearby woodland is connected to its female occupants. Locals complain that the adjacent woodland has been destroyed by excrement. It is clear this is not from animals unless animals have suddenly learned how to wipe, as toilet paper has been left strewn everywhere in the scenic spot. Ryvale House is a beautiful 18th century residence surrounded by an area of trees known as Squirrel Woods. Residents there have been closely watching to see who is defecating in the woods. Dennis McCarthy, chairman of the Ryvale Lawns Residents Association, has said, "Squirrel Wood is about 3/4 of an acre in size. We noticed that there were clumps of toilet paper appearing in the wood just outside the wall of Ryvale House. We were keeping an eye on it, and basically it was people using the woods for what we'll call number ones. Piddling, in other words. But then it progressed on to number twos, and I said, this has gone on too far." He went on to say, "I made contact with Kildare County Council and I said our woods were now contaminated. I had barrier tape and I taped off all the different areas that were contaminated, of which there were around 5. Kildare County Council conducted a clean-up of the area twice at a cost to the taxpayer. They met with the management of Ryvale House and alerted them to the issue, notifying them of the number of complaints they've received from vexed locals. The council stated that management have rejected the accusations that residents are using the woods as a toilet, and I suppose they would insist it's therefore not their responsibility to pay to clean up the mess or even keep an eye on what's going on. But what we have here is a situation where locals have been watching over the course of a few weeks to carefully gather evidence, so in that respect the accusations have substance. We know locals have not made up this story, as the council did have to clean up. It's very hard to imagine locals have just suddenly started going to the toilet in the woods themselves, just in order to set up IPAS residents. And so given all these factors, there doesn't seem to be any other reasonable explanation. The only plausible explanation seems to be the one posed by the complainants. Of course, that is not to say all of the residents there have been behaving in this way, and the ones who aren't are probably not at all happy that they are being tarred with the same brush. It could certainly be a small number of individuals who are choosing to go to the toilet in this manner. The management arriving at the conclusion the defecating and toilet paper has nothing to do with the residents does not stand up to scrutiny. Unless they have been monitoring the toilet habits of their residents 24/7, they cannot reasonably conclude that witnesses are incorrect. Also, why wouldn't they themselves make it their business to watch what's going on outside the perimeter of the house itself? Surely they would want to, and could easily offer an alternative explanation by asking a staff member to discreetly keep an eye on the area that is being used as an unsuitable toileting facility. We can assume they have not surveilled the area, given they haven't said, "We have seen who is doing this, and it is definitely not our residents." There is also an incentive for them to be dishonest, as any incidences of trouble could, in their eyes, potentially lead to issues securing future contracts, although I don't think they need to worry on that front. The County Council reported locals' concerns to the IPAS accommodation procurement team in Roderick O'Gorman's department, who are tasked with liaising with the management of facilities contracted by them for accommodation of IPAS applicants, and the department, unsurprisingly, also denies that the appearance of human excrement and toilet tissue is as a consequence of IPAS residents defecating outside. But who does the department think is responsible for this disgusting degradation of this local beauty spot? By denying that it's the IPAS residents, are they then implying that it is the locals who have made the woods their toilet? Kildare County Council has now more or less washed its hands of the issue and are passing the buck by asserting they are not, quote, responsible for the contracting of accommodation for international protection applicants or for the management of any accommodation facility contracted by IPAS for the provision of accommodation for international protection applicants. Meanwhile, Kildare North Social Democrats TD Katherine Murphy was forced to wade in and spoke more like she's presenting an episode of Unsolved Mysteries than like someone elected to represent local constituents. She who thinks that Irish people wore a cloak of white privilege even during the famine has added nothing of value to the debacle, stating that the presumably privileged locals take great pride in the small woods and that, quote, people started to notice that they were being used as a toilet, which prompts the question, why is this happening and why is it happening now? Because it hadn't been happening up until recent months when it began presenting as an issue, end quote. This is a case of comment on an important matter affecting your constituents without really commenting on the matter. All she has said is basically that there wasn't an issue before there was an issue. The far left Social Democrats would no doubt find a way to spin such a story into a case of migrants having no privilege, if indeed it turns out to be that the residents have been emptying their bells in the great outdoors. The residents have been there since spring 2023, but the issue of consternation has only arisen in recent weeks. So what's changed? Have the iPass residents changed? As in, is there a different set of women? Or perhaps some males have arrived? Is it a cultural practice for some that they kept under wraps initially upon their arrival, but now the social etiquette has been abandoned and they miss the habits they had prior to coming here and disrespect the locals? Or are their facilities inadequate? The council stated in regards to facilities, in line with expected standards, Ryvale House is equipped with the sufficient sanitation facilities for the number of residents occupying the centre. These facilities are regularly cleaned and maintained. Ryvale House operates a large capacity external water tanker that is regularly monitored and refilled to guarantee an uninterrupted supply of running water. iPass has received no complaints from residents of Ryvale House on any issues relating to sanitation or the provision of running water. Now, it would be interesting to see if that's really the case, but it would be hard to find out because we probably can't send FOIs to these private businesses. Despite what they have said, it is possible there are not enough toilets for the number of people, and I would say the toilets are communal and not private. However, there is also nothing private about going to the toilet in the woods. And even if a lack of facilities or adequately maintained facilities was an issue, it would be relatively easy for residents to highlight this to their key workers, following which it would be resolved very quickly with the threat of a protest, the type we have seen from some migrants in other centres for various alleged issues. You can be guaranteed it would also be highlighted in the media. Furthermore, even if you do feel you need to go to the toilet elsewhere, the least you can do is pick up after yourself, including your toilet paper, and to not do so is showing blatant disrespect to locals and also to their fellow iPass residents who are not behaving in this manner, as now the spotlight is unfairly on them. What's important to remember in all this also is that in Ireland, public defecation is generally covered under legislation related to public order, public health and environmental protection. While there may not be a specific law solely addressing public defecation, various statutes and regulations collectively prohibit such behaviour, and they don't just relate to indecent exposure or offending the sensibilities of others. Defecating in public is actually a public and environmental health risk. According to New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, excrement and untreated sewage can be washed by rain into streams, rivers and coastal waters, and associated disease-causing organisms such as salmonella can enter the water. This bacteria makes water unsafe for drinking and swimming. So it is more than just a case of being disgusting or harmlessly acting outside of social norms. In Leixlip there is also a drinking water plant very, very close to where this issue has arisen. Obviously, it goes without saying that children and adults can also step into the excrement. I unfortunately had the experience of my dog consuming some human excrement in a wooded walkway. I know it was human because there was dirty tissue. I also know someone else who has had this experience with their pet in recent times. Anyone who would do this has no excuse unless they are genuinely homeless. In New York City, migrants going to the toilet in public has become a massive issue after 100,000 migrants were taken in since 2022. In January 2024, the New York Post ran the story New York City neighbourhood turned into giant toilet as migrants litter park with poop, leaving cups of urine on doorsteps. The report goes on to say migrants waiting outside to be accommodated in an East Village intake centre have been, quote, crappy neighbours. For 6 months now, thousands of adult migrants have been going to the toilet on the sidewalks and streets because the portaloos provided for them became so filthy last week that cleaners gave up maintaining them. One such worker stated, "There was a cup of what I thought was somebody's discarded hot chocolate that turned out to be not hot chocolate." Locals report an overwhelming stench and say they don't like to walk the neighbourhood anymore as a result of the filth. As for the migrants, why have the Biden administration brought all of these people in they supposedly care about, only to leave them languishing in the streets with nowhere to stay? This sounds like a dreadful situation for all involved. The migrants say they have nowhere else to go but in the street. But those who find cups and bottles of urine or piles of human waste on their doorsteps beg to differ and feel rightly that they should not have to open their door to be confronted with this on a daily basis. It would make more sense if the migrants did actually go in the wooded areas or the parks, although I'm not condoning that, but I can't understand why they would be putting cups of poo and urine on people's doorsteps unless they disrespect the locals. In the case of Ryevale House, it would appear that there is no excuse because toilets are provided. Whoever is going in the woods may just prefer going outside, and they may not care for laws or regulations which have surely been explained to the residents. The Litter Pollution Act gives local authorities power to address issues related to littering and dumping of waste in public places. Public defecation is a form of littering and may be subject to penalties under these laws. Also, many local authorities in Ireland have bylaws that forbid behaviours that may be detrimental to public health, hygiene and decency. These may include prohibitions against urinating or defecating in public places. Acts of public defecation may also be breaches of public order. Under the Public Order Act, engaging in offensive or disorderly behaviour in public spaces can result in a criminal conviction. Lastly, Ireland has environmental protection regulations in order to preserve the cleanliness and integrity of public places. Defecating in public is, as already stated, an environmental hazard. In reality, there is probably little to no consequence of defecating in public. A Garda probably has to see you doing it, and it's questionable whether or not they would actually do anything about it in this case. But you can theoretically be jailed, fined or imprisoned. Enforcement of bylaws, etc. may vary by region, and local authorities have the discretion to determine how to proceed with such cases. In this particular case, one would imagine there is an onus on the council and/or iPass centre to set up cameras to catch people in the act. However, it would also not be ideal that residents who walk there would then also be subjected to being filmed when they have done nothing wrong. Therefore, there are little to no consequences for this behaviour, not for those making a fortune off this human trafficking scam, and not for those committing the offences. There's probably another conversation to have out of this around cultural differences, but we'll leave that for another time. Suffice to say, the public ought to take this case discussed here very seriously, as it is a further sign that when there is a fallout from these places, all responsibility will be ensued by the owners and management, as well as local and national government. As a result, local communities will be left clearing up the mess in the long run. Other problems arising from these centres include some residents doing drugs in surrounding woodland, although there have been no reports of this in leixlip as far as I'm aware. Those issues of drug taking and other illegal activities have all been ignored by centres, councils and McEntee and O'Gorman's departments. They are happy to let communities turn into lawless ghettos that are devoid of the rules of social decency and normalcy. And that affects everyone who lives in those communities, Irish and those who have come in and are established here a long time or not. So that proves that they don't care about anyone, Irish or otherwise, and we've said this all along. On one hand, we are told we are not entitled to object to who comes into our communities, but when there's a fallout from who arrives, it is local people who will be abandoned and left to sort out the mess when the shit quite literally hits the fan.